All right. You asked for it, a deep dive on Russia. Beyond the headlines. It's a big one, guys, like geographically massive.
No kidding.
Mhm.
Did you know Russia is literally bigger than the dwarf planet Pluto?
Wait, seriously. I know it's huge, but Pluto huge.
11 time zones huge. Think about it. From one end to the other, when folks in Moscow are wrapping up their workday.
Someone in Vladivostok is just having their morning tea.
Exactly. It's mind-boggling.
So with all that space, it must be absolutely packed with people, right?
You'd think so, but it's actually ninth in global population.
Really?
Yeah.
See, that's what I mean about going beyond the headlines. I would have guessed way higher.
It's this fascinating paradox.
Mhm.
Geographically enormous, but not so much population-wise. And that, believe it or not, tells us a lot about Russia.
Okay, I'm hooked already, so how do we even start unpacking this? Back to the beginning.
Let's rewind to the 9th century. Kievan Rosas. This is where it all starts.
Kievan Rosas, as in... Is that where the name comes from?
It is. And this wasn't just some tiny village. It was a powerful East Slavic state.
Yes.
Centered in what's now Ukraine.
Hold on, Ukraine. As in the war that's going on right now. Talk about a blast from the past.
Right. It's all connected. This early period, this Kievan Rosas, is where Rus, Russia, even Ruthenia, those terms originate.
Wow. So we're talking about a legacy that goes back centuries. Okay, this is blowing my mind already. And we're still in, what, the 9th century?
We've got a long way to go. After Kievan Rosas, you have the Mongol rule. It really casts a shadow over everything.
Right, the Mongols. Not exactly known for being, shall we say, hands-off rulers.
They left their mark, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But by the 15th century, we see the rise of the Tsars.
And that takes us all the way up to, like, Peter the Great and Catherine the Great.
Exactly. But first, let's talk about Peter. He was obsessed with Western Europe. Modernization, technology.
Yeah. Wasn't he the one who built St. Petersburg?
That's the one. He envisioned it as his window to the West, and it was a direct result of his fascination with all things European.
I mean, St. Petersburg is gorgeous, but I had no idea that's where it came from.
It was all part of his plan to propel Russia into the modern world, to make it a major power. And let's not forget Catherine the Great. Talk about expanding an empire.
She was playing Risk on a whole other level. But seriously, all that expansion had to come with some pushback, right?
Oh, absolutely. Napoleon learned that the hard way.
Oh yeah, Napoleon. Didn't go so well for him, did it?
Let's just say that Russia has a way of making even the most brilliant military minds rethink their strategies.
Something about those Russian winters, I'm guessing.
It's not just the winters. It's also the sheer vastness of the country and the resilience of the people. They fought like demons, even against overwhelming odds.
And that kind of feeds into this whole image of Russia, right? Tough, unyielding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also created this undercurrent of suspicion towards the outside world. Like they're always on guard, waiting for the next attack. And that's something that stayed with Russia to this day.
So we've got this image of Russia as this tough, unyielding force, but also with this lingering suspicion of the outside world. And then, bam, the 20th century hits. Revolutions, wars, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union. Talk about a roller coaster ride.
No doubt. The 20th century was a period of massive upheaval for Russia. And we're not just talking about political shifts, but events that left a deep psychological scar on the nation.
Right, because we're talking about millions of lives lost, families torn apart. This isn't ancient history. The trauma is still very real.
Absolutely. From the revolutions of 1917, which led to the creation of the Soviet Union.
Which, let's be honest, was not exactly a walk in the park for a lot of people.
Understatement. Stalin's reign was brutal. Forced collectivization, political purges, millions perished.
And then, of course, World War II. Or, as it's known in Russia, the Great Patriotic War.
Imagine this. Almost 27 million Soviet citizens died during the war. That's a staggering number.
It's almost impossible to wrap your head around that kind of loss. Entire cities were reduced to rubble.
And yet, amidst the devastation, you see this incredible resilience. The stories of ordinary people showing extraordinary courage in the face of Nazi aggression.
Right. That spirit of defiance, of never giving up, it seems to be a recurring theme in Russian history.
It is.
Yeah.
But it also fed into this narrative of suffering and sacrifice, which, combined with the delayed Allied invasion of Normandy, deepened that suspicion of the West.
It's like this feeling of, we did it all ourselves while the rest of the world just watched.
Exactly. And that feeling, that sense of being let down by the West, it resonates even today.
Okay, so we've got this legacy of resilience, but also resentment, and then boom, the Soviet Union collapses. Just like that.
1991. The end of an era. Can you imagine what that must have been like? One day you're part of a superpower.
And the next
How
year,
about
well, what do we fit in now?
Exactly. That's the question a lot of Russians were asking themselves in the 1990s. It was a time of economic hardship, political instability.
The rise of the oligarchs. Not exactly a shining moment for democracy, right?
Not exactly. And it's against this backdrop of uncertainty that Vladimir Putin comes to power, a former KGB agent, promising to restore order, stability, and national pride.
And to a certain extent, he did, right? At least initially. The economy stabilized, Russia asserted itself on the world stage again.
He did. But that stability came at a cost. Under Putin, we see a gradual erosion of democratic institutions, a crackdown on dissent.
And this idea of Russia as a resurgent power, standing up to the West, pushing back against NATO expansion.
It all ties back to those historical anxieties we've been talking about. That fear of being encircled, of being exploited. Putin's a master at tapping into those deep-seated fears.
So we've talked about this legacy of resilience, this suspicion of the outside world, and this desire for respect on the world stage. And then you can't ignore it, the war in Ukraine. It feels like everything we've discussed so far leads right up to this moment.
You're hitting on something really important. The war in Ukraine, it's not just about territory. It's about historical narratives, anxieties about security. It's a clash of worldviews.
And that whole concept of the near abroad, it's like this idea that Russia has a special interest in those countries that were once part of the Soviet Union.
Right, and this isn't just some abstract geopolitical theory. For a lot of Russians, the connections to these countries are very real. Family ties, shared history, culture.
So when we talk about Ukraine, we have to factor in this sense of historical grievance, right? This feeling that Russia's sphere of influence is being threatened.
Exactly, and we can't forget the human cost of this conflict either. The lives lost, the families displaced, the cities. It's a tragedy on an unimaginable scale.
It's a stark reminder that these geopolitical issues, these power struggles, they have very real consequences for real people.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here? It feels like Russia is at this crossroads, trying to figure out its place in the world, balancing its past with its future. What's the key takeaway here?
The key takeaway is that Russia is a country of immense complexity. It's a place with this incredibly rich history, this vibrant culture, and a people who've faced unbelievable hardship. If you want to understand Russia, you have to look beyond the headlines, beyond the stereotypes.
You have to dive deeper, just like we're doing now.
Exactly. Explore Russian literature, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. Their works offer such profound insights into the Russian soul.
What about music? Any recommendations there?
Oh, definitely. Tchaikovsky, Shostakovich. You can hear the echoes of history in their music, the longing for beauty, for connection.
It's about bridging those gaps, right? Recognizing our shared humanity, even when there are these big political differences.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, if we open ourselves up to different perspectives, if we embrace the world in all its complexity, we can find those common threads that unite us.
Beautifully said. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive on Russia. It's been a fascinating journey, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And for those of you listening, remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. We'll see you next time.